I am so excited for our today's guest, Janeen Vosper. She is awesome. You're going to love her. She helps leaders build personal brands, get noticed out there in the world. And her business, Speech Perfect, helps people find their inner voice and confidence. So welcome, Janeen.
Thank you very much, Eugenia. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, great. So let's start by how you figure out within yourself that speaking, that showing up, that's being out there is actually your pathway. Like, how did you find that this is your thing to do in the world?
Eugenia, I've always been a confident person. So that when people look at me, even as a tomboy as a child, and I'd always be the one that would jump on the roller coaster and take the risks and do everything. So when people saw that in me, they probably don't understand how the speaking and not being able to speak up when it's really important was something that I couldn't do. I was at one of my dearest friend's mother's funeral. Her father had passed away a couple of months beforehand, and he'd been unwell. Everyone expected his passing. They were able to get up and speak about the man that he was and how he had looked after the family and supported them. They'd been part of this church for a very long time, and the pastor had been there 40 years, and he knew the family so well. So what he was able to say was all very heartfelt and real. When my friend's mum passed away, and this lady I called Auntie, it was our neighbour growing up. I don't know, whether that happens everywhere, but you sort of can run in and out of the neighbour's house just as easily as your own. And that's how close we were. When Auntie Shirley passed, it was unexpected, and none of the family felt that they could say anything. They just were so distraught. In that short couple of months, that pastor that had been there had retired and moved on, and there was a new pastor. So the only person that could speak to this phenomenal woman that had given so much was a pastor who didn't know her. He did a lovely job, but that was all that she got. And I'm sitting in the pews with my mum and dad, and I've been in sales. I've been doing all these things confidently for years, but I wanted to, at that moment, get up in front of everybody and speak for this woman, and I couldn't do it. And I decided at that moment that I would never be mute again, that if I wanted to have a voice and find my voice, and I would use my voice. And that's what I have done for the last 20, 30 years now, since she left us, is to have a voice. And I've been blessed to be able to speak on behalf of other people, friends, family that have passed away, or in happier situations as well, of course. And I had people come up to me and say, "Thank you so much. That was exactly what I wanted to say, and you were my voice."
Yeah, isn't it? It's amazing how sometimes there's so much energy build up from the charge of either grief or excitement or some message you have, and no words come out. It's almost like the translation in the brain to linear language doesn't happen from the bigness that we have within us. So how do you resolve that for your clients? Like, what do you suggest for somebody like that? Because there's so many coaches who are experiencing very similar thing that you just told us in your story, when they feel like, okay, I need to say something on this. This is important. And I have this thing within me. And then they like terrified to open their mouth because they don't know how to. They don't know what to say.
There's a few different things. One is the very practical component of practicing. The more you do it, the more you do it, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get at speaking, whether you are in person or you're virtually. And the beauty of having our mobile phones now, because we can continue to record ourselves and delete and record and delete and record and delete. That way we get to practice and we see ourselves and get more and more comfortable with how we look and sound, because that's often throws people out. We're so critical of ourselves rather than just recognizing that's how everybody else sees us and hears us every single day. And to let that go, that criticism or that judgment of self when you're doing it. So that's the practical component, is to practice it. Feeling as if you are already able to do it is another. I don't like fake it till you make it. That doesn't resonate with me at all. But feel as if you are that speaker. Feel that you are that confident person. That owning that sense of real heartfelt belief, then it helps you take on something that might have been an extreme challenge. So owning that. And what I often get people to do is there something that you know you're great at, you get in the groove. Every time you do it, it brings you joy. You just feel so good at it. And to capture that feeling and apply that when you have to do something like speaking, that is challenging. The other component is I really want to challenge people who have got a phenomenal message. They've got something of high value to share with the world, but because of their ego, they don't do it. Mm-hmm. And ego is an interesting word. And I find that when I say that, people often go, oh, it is. It's me thinking about me and not thinking about my audience. And that really has a big shift for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that is so true that most people, when they think about like, oh, public speaking, presenting, whatever, like being out there, even doing Facebook Live or Instagram Live, like really minimize it to basics, still feels so scary. They think that, well, it's my fear that's stopping me. So this is a very interesting angle to say, like, actually, it's your ego. It's you thinking about yourself instead of focusing on service on your audience, right?
Yeah. If you've got something to share, and it's the same as when I'm teaching sales, it's, how dare you not share it with the world? You've been gifted with it. This is, your opportunity to maybe change one life or hundreds of lives, or whether it's your health or business, whatever it might be that you've got that skill base in. So why are you holding on to it and not sharing it out with the world?
So where do you see confidence in speaking comes from? Because I've seen a lot of my clients and just people in general that it's almost like they get tongue-tied, like no words come out. They know what they want to say, but words don't come out. So where do you see confidence comes from? Because we know that inner confidence connects to, of course, self-expression, and sales happen because you're expressing your message correctly. So we all want sales in business. But what do you do when this blanking happens? When the person starts talking and they just like, I don't have any words, and it just gets weird. It's almost like they get to a 2-year-old in their presentation.
I have seen that happen, yes. And it is really difficult for people who have this extreme fear about putting themselves out there and speaking. And that's one of the things that people come to me for more often than not, is how do they get the mind and the mouth working at the same time? Again, coming back to that practice and just getting on screen, open up your Zoom yourself and start talking to yourself. I'm sure that your listeners know their business well, or know what they've got to offer. That it's not something that they would have to even write down to know, I've got to remember these points. So what my recommendation is just start to figure out, what points do I want to talk about, and have 3 things that are always something you can go back to. So even if you forget everything else, then these are the points that I know I can go back to and speak about this every single time. And it's particularly for people who prefer to be the readers and people that like words. I'm working with a client at the moment who is a physician. He's an orthopedic resident, and he's struggling having even social conversations. And it's about, for him, it's knowing what to say next. I've given him some little tips of things that he might be able to ask or say without feeling like you're grilling someone. But having something prepared that is just your go-to is a really good start.
Yeah, and would you say it's also a balance, though, between like not over scripting it, because then it's like you're thinking, so you wrote it down and now you're reading the thing you wrote, and that never sounds right. So it's like balance between having the right topics, but more sort of like bulleted format, like so you know what you want to say. But on the other hand, you have to know how to bridge it. Like for me, this is like, as a copy coach, like a lot of the things I do with my clients is helping them bridge one topic to another, like sequence of topics, so that it doesn't sound awkward. So can you speak more to that? Because I think that's where a lot of times people get lost. So it becomes clunky when they're trying to say stuff.
Oh, definitely. And that's one of the things when I attend a lot of networking events, either in person or virtually, I see people read their pitch. Really? You don't know who you are or your business or what you do for people or how you help your audience, your customers, that you can't just say it. But the perfectionists amongst those like to make sure they don't forget to say anything, that all the words are there, and they'll have the thing fully scripted. And it is. It sounds like you're reading it, and it's not authentic, and it definitely doesn't come across you genuinely know how to do what you say you're going to do and how you can help people. But yes, dot points is definitely my recommended suggestion. But it is so hard for those amongst us that like to have everything scripted out just in case they forget to say something. And it actually causes the opposite problem. As you said, the mind goes blank often, and memorizing, unless you've got a photographic memory, don't even attempt to do that, because I guarantee you'll forget something, and it'll cause that brain freeze. What was the thing I was meant to do next? And as you said, how do you segue between each of those points? I've forgotten, and it causes all of that drama. So yeah.
Oh, I'm so with you. I'm so glad you're on the same page with me on that, because I personally find that, like, when people say, oh, you have to write a perfect speech and then you have to say it like a million times to memorize it, to say it all, I just find it energetically so cold, dry, and wrong. It's just not gonna translate. So can you speak to the leveraging of one story in when they do go on, like when they have an opportunity? Because, like, let's say a coach that maybe has an opportunity to be on a podcast, on an event, in a conference, they have an opportunity to present themselves. And what I see, at least with like my type of people, is that they either over talk their story to the point that nobody cares and it's boring and it's just like you're going in the direction of too much personal processing almost, or it becomes too rigid, like, this is my degree, this is what I've studied, whatever, and again, nobody cares. So there's like a fine line there in bringing the story in a way that's relevant to what the topic is and who the audience is, right? So can you speak more to leveraging one story, like how to do the presentation? Like, what do you pick out of your story that actually going to hit the mark and result in sales versus people just rolling their eyes?
I love that. There's one word that you used in there that is the perfect word, and that's relevance. It has to be relevant to what you're doing. If I continue on from that story that I told you about Auntie Shirley, then if I was wrapping up something, and I would then add, and this is why I am determined that I work with people to help them find their voice and get their voice, so they aren't ever stuck in that situation, and realizing how vital it is to have a voice. So if you are finding that you are challenged and not able to speak when you need to speak, and your message isn't getting across clearly, then we need to work together or talk. So that's how I would wrap up something that was that story. But I also encourage people to start collecting stories, going back to childhood through your working career, things more recently, your family, your friends, and start collecting anecdotes, write them down. I was challenged with that about 20 years ago, and I don't do that now because I just have lots of stories and I can make up anything about anything. But it's so important as a great start just to think about, oh, I remember when I had my pet. What's the relevance of having that pet in what you're doing, and figuring out where that came from.
So if we go down to basics, like assume that they don't know anything about this, how would they know, like what would be the criteria, like maybe 3 top criteria, which stories, sub-stories, mini stories to pull out from their life that would, like, how do they know that it's going to be relevant to what their job is, like what they're putting out there in the world? What would be the criteria for which stories are relevant?
And that, again, that relevance. So why would telling this story mean that somebody thinks you are an expert in a field, and that you can help them improve what they're doing? What's the purpose of telling that story? So that's really where you're going with it all the time. And depending on how much time you had, so I went through that story fairly quickly, and when I deliver it in a full version of it, and I've got, if I'm speaking for 45 minutes, just myself presenting somewhere on stage or online, I'll go into a bigger version of it, and I'll create more. It definitely becomes a lot more emotive when I do that, and but it's also the visual. Those old churches, like those old A-frame churches where the wooden ones, and you walk down the aisles, and it's just the pews either side, and there's this beautiful little altar out the front. So you will create more of the imagery as part of the story. That's the important part, rather than here's a fact, and here's a fact. And this doctor I was working with the other day, he we started trying, I was getting stories out of him, and he said, oh, he just got engaged and he flew to Europe. His fiance had never been to Europe, so he took her to Europe. I went, that's nice. So what happened? And he said, oh, okay, I wanted to surprise her, so I didn't tell her, but I booked business class tickets to Europe. I said, that's really good. So what happened when you were there? Well, I did want to surprise her and propose. I organised photographers where we went, so there was photographers, and she wasn't aware. I said, where'd you go? Well, I didn't go to, and it built and it built and it built and it built. And it became this amazing story of all of this effort that he'd gone to make something really memorable and special. But he didn't see that as something important. And people wanted the visual of the photographer, the Swiss mountains and the space where he proposed. That's part of what you've got to create, is that visual and emotional component also with it. It's so important.
And the emotional component and visual, like I teach visual marketing. So in a sense, it's kind of that. It's like, can you describe from your perspective what it means? Because like for me, it's giving adjectives and pictures as if you're walking them through a movie. So how would you describe that?
I describe it exactly the same. You want people on that journey with you. And it can be like, as I just said, with the church, those little churches. The ones, I think everyone's probably been in them before. They're beautiful. They're little wooden, and they've just got that A-frame. So the language then is, those little churches, and it's, oh yeah, I do. Okay, and you're presupposing that somebody's got that connection with you. And I said earlier, and I went over it fairly quickly, and I would expand on it. I don't know about everywhere else, but that neighbour next door where the kids, you'd be able to run in and out of their house as if it was yours. That sort of thing that you build that, okay, yeah, I've done it. And what you're doing is getting your listeners connected with you and nodding and with you emotionally, usually smiling.
So even if the story is small, like I'm going to summarize it here, everything you said. So even if the story is short, small, and only like takes 60 seconds, let's say, within somebody's presentation, you want them to presuppose that the audience gets what they're saying, to include them in as if they kind of buddy already through the journey together, and give some visual imagery, while at the same time make sure that the story points into either one's expertise or the solution of what they're offering for the client.
And to do that in 60 seconds. Yes, yeah. And it does. It takes practice, but it's so much more interesting saying, I do. An example, one of the networking events that I drive to, it's along a highway, and the traffic always builds up. So if I was telling that story, I was driving here this morning, and the traffic, like usual, bumper to bumper. Most of you have been on the M1 before, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. You stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. I'm thinking, I'm going to be running late. And I start to get a little bit stressed. And then I went, I can't help it. I'm just going to be there when I can arrive. And that's what happens sometimes in daily life, doesn't it? When we're trying to get business done, trying to get all the tasks done, we've got this stress, and then some challenge comes along, it stops us, it holds us back. And instead of getting that stress, think about how you might be able to work through it calmly. It's one of the things I do with people when they are not sure about how to overcome challenges. We work out some strategies that when they arise, it's not going to hold them up too long.
Yeah, this is very good. What you did is you connected a life example to something that you do and to why they need it. Okay, so listeners, get that. This is also one of the things I teach that called literally like using life examples to connect to like promoting yourself without promoting. So this is perfect. Great job for giving them the example of this. This is awesome. So one more question I have for you that I've been actually asked before, and some of my clients who knew that you're going to be my guest, they were like, oh, ask her that. A lot of times coaches who try to do video presentations as type of marketing, like they either go Facebook Lives or Instagram Lives, or they try to like leverage other people's audiences by teaching in somebody else's groups. What they find difficult is that when you do those things online, you don't see the audience, you don't do it directly with the person. And if they like in a one-on-one conversation with a potential client, like the sales call, let's say, no problem. They can read the person. They know exactly what to say intuitively. Everything just works magically. They're great at sales. But when they try to do it in this format of digital sort of online virtual without having the direct input. I mean, they try to imagine a fake person they're talking to. They tried all these different things, and it just feels awkward, and it feels like they're falling flat, like they're not sure who they're talking to. So can you speak to that? Because I've been like literally asked to ask you that.
I had an example of that. I presented to about 50 accountants, and the format that they used meant I couldn't see a single person. All I had was my slides, and I couldn't see me. I just had the slides going through. And it was 1 hour that you have to stay
My heart goes out to you. That must have been hard.
When I agreed to it, I didn't realize I wouldn't be able to see anybody, and I couldn't
or yourself even. That's even worse.
But I couldn't ask them if you resonate with this, just pop a yes in the chat. I couldn't do any of that I'd normally do on my webinars. So you have to be more upbeat and excited. You have to take it up a level if you're going to do that, to keep people engaged for an hour, and you have to give value, obviously, with what you're presenting. Lots of great images. That's such an important factor. Flick through a lot more images than things that you would ever think that you would need when you're doing something that you don't have that audience feedback. But most of it is your energy, Eugenia, that you have to stay upbeat. And I'm just, you're talking to the camera the whole time, and take it up a level.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say if somebody says, when I'm talking to a person I can see, I read them, like subconsciously, energetically, intuitively, whatever we want to call it. But like I pick up what I need to say. I can kind of like feel where the objection would be before they even say it. So I know what to say. The same thing if I do like a group Zoom call, I can see their faces. When I do Facebook Live or Instagram Live or something like that, and I don't see their faces, now I'm like making shit up. Like I don't know anymore what I'm saying. Like, how do I know that it's hitting the spot?
A couple of things there is make sure that you're covering all the learning styles to start with, so you don't disconnect from anybody. Then you need to make sure things are visual and auditory, changing your voice up. And when I work with people, helping them remove filler words or because subconsciously that disconnects from people, especially when you're doing that type of presentation. It has to be things for people to read, and also emotions. There has to be things for people to feel. So those are the four learning styles.
When they're making up stuff to say, because they not like they have in their head the points of what they want to say, but it feels like they're not feeling anymore like the audience, so they just guessing essentially. That to them it feels like they're making stuff up, which we know that they're still following the overall what they need to say, but it doesn't feel like anchored anymore.
No, and I get that. What I do is, again, is that presuppose or build that connection with the audience and me. The things that are common, that we'll both be able to go, that's exactly right. So it'll be wording such as, this has probably happened to you before. Mm-hmm. I can imagine everyone has felt like that. So again, I'm using different words out of each of those learning styles also, and that just takes a learning and skill and practice to do that. That I would use imagine, because I'd want the visual people to be connected with that.
Yeah, and the four learning styles, like, can you clarify that for the people so that they can see like visual?
Yes, visual, auditory, spoken word, kinesthetics, so that's your sense of touch, feelings, and auditory, digital, or reading. So it's a VARK, yeah.
So when they would use a phrase, like you would use something, imagine, for the visual type, right? What would you use for the other types?
For auditory, this probably resonates with you. So it's something that you might be feeling. This is exactly what happens when you're doing this. There's ways that we can make sense of this. But using different predicates.
Yeah, that one I usually use something like, you and I both know that, which would speak to this people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's important to be able to ensure that, especially when you're in a stressful situation and you're delivering, this is happening, and you might be highly visual. So everything you're doing is about using visual cues. And that's deleting, we're all a bit visual. Some of us are highly visual, but you're deleting at least 50% of your audience who aren't, I don't know, I enjoyed the content. I thought the person was good. I just didn't connect with them. And it's that simple little thing that they may not have figured out because they've missed the mark with the language that they're using.
Mm-hmm. So being able to include these little extra bridge words would be beneficial for somebody speaking to audience they cannot see, so that they don't feel like they're making stuff up, but they actually connecting sort of just by the fact of using different connecting techniques.
Correct. Absolutely correct with that. It's so important to recognize for any presentation you're doing, sales pitch, whatever you're doing, it's never about you, it's about your audience. 100% is always about the audience. And how can I connect with that audience, and then have them, and as you know, we talk about know, like, and trust what you do. That's an important factor as well.
Yeah, like for me, I usually imagine what could possibly be the either objection or some thought that would come up or emotion that would come up. And I almost like a kaleidoscope go through all of them as I speak. Somehow I weave them in. So this way, over the course of, let's say, an hour, chances are I hit on every possible one.
Absolutely. And it doesn't hurt to have little prompts, you know, around your desktop as well. Oh, I haven't gone that way yet.
Yeah, that way, even if you don't see the audience, you're still making sure. And at least in my opinion, a lot of the digital type of presentations, they're not going to be watched in the moment. They're going to be watched after in replays. That's where you get most views anyway. So you wouldn't know who the audience would be, even if you had some audience live, because different audience might be watching later. So making sure that you keep in mind that it's not so much about, oh, I want to connect to the audience. It's more like what you're saying, Janeen, it's connecting to a way of delivering your message that in itself will connect to the audience. Like, you got to trust that if you know what you're talking about and you use correct bridging, it would get there.
You got it all covered there. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, this is very important. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing this. I think this would be super valuable. And I know you have free gift for our audience. So can you speak a little more on that?
I do. I have a free ebook, and it's about overcoming barriers to success. So it steps out some things we actually talk about at the ARK in there. You can identify how you can build rapport a little bit easier and quicker through the way you, one, can read people, but also how the language you use.
Okay, great. Well, this information will be in the show notes and everything else you need to know about Janeen. So janeenvosper.com is her website, and all the links are in description. So you can find her, connect with her, ask her questions if you're interested in finding out more, and definitely check out the free gift. Click the link in the show notes. And thank you so much, Janeen, for being here. This was really fun.
I've absolutely loved it. And I love sharing information, and I want people to have a voice. And that's why I'm here, Eugenia.